Turn-based battle systems suck. As a developer, from a player's perspective, your combat loop typically revolves around navigating the UI, selecting some options, then watching what you selected play out. But as a developer, getting those systems up and running typically takes a lot of time. If you think about it, turn-based combat only really requires the player to input what skill they're using and who they're using it on. Everything past that is managed by whatever system the developer created. Well, it's no secret that I myself am making a turn-based RPG, so today I'd like to pop the hood and show you how I achieved a mostly functional battle system. So to understand what's happening behind the scenes, we first need to understand how the battle system works in general. Turns are determined by the timeline found at the bottom of the screen. When a unit reaches the cast phase, they are prompted to input an action, basically a skill and a target. Then when the skill is done casting, the action plays out. Pretty straightforward. But behind the scenes, there is a lot of micromanaging that happens just to make these systems work. So the governing body that controls the combat system is called the Battle Manager. The vast majority of the battle logic is handled here. Immediately after players select an action, units begin their casting sequence. Internally, this is just a timer that counts down, and when the number hits 0, the system queues up a battle action. Battle actions are a class that contain all of the information required for the upcoming attack sequence. Namely the initiating unit, the target, the skills used, and some edge case information like if the skill is a counterattack. This action is then queued up in a list to be processed by the battle manager. Well, you might be wondering, why add the battle action to a queue? Why not just execute it immediately? Well, that's to cover the situation where two units reach the end of the timeline at the exact same frame. Queuing them up just allows the system to do one at a time instead of the bug that I had before where both units would just attack at the same frame. So once an action is queued, it triggers the battle sequence. A battle sequence is basically all the fancy stuff that happens during an attack animation, like positioning the units, spawning particle effects, and dealing damage. The special thing about these battle sequences though is that they all run as coroutines. A coroutine is basically a block of code that runs separate from the main thread. So it runs in parallel to whatever the main code is doing. But a key reason for using coroutines is for their ability to be easily paused and resumed at any point. Setting the battle sequences as coroutines allows me to time different parts of combat with particle effects, lighting, and animations. For one example, I tell the system to wait for the particles animations to finish before spawning the damage number text. Little things like that. So as mentioned, the battle sequences handle many things. I mean like 1500 lines of code worth. But some of the most important tasks include target correction, UI updates, screen effects like hit stop, camera effects, battle calculations, and then returning everything back to its original state. Now I know I just abbreviated 1500 lines of code with some bullet points, but it's because most of it isn't really groundbreaking technical stuff. It's just a lot of things that happens at once. But there is one section I wanted to highlight, and that's the battle calculations. To get the damage output, I multiply the unit's power stat with their skill's damage percentage. Every skill basically has a percentage that tells you how that skill scales with power. So if you have 100 power and your skill has 75% damage, your base damage output will be 75. I then multiply that base value with all your multipliers like damage buffs and crit multipliers. This gives you your total damage output. As for defenses, I played a lot with defenses as well, but I ultimately decided to just have percent damage mitigation. So if you have 10 defense, that's basically equivalent to 10% damage reduction. This really helped simplify a lot of the defense calculations. However, because these damage reductions can get really strong really fast, I decided to scale it on the extremes. This is actually something I borrowed from Genshin Impact's resistance scaling. Defense above 75% gets scaled heavily to tone down the stacking effects. We also do the same for negative values by cutting their effectiveness in half. So if you have -10 defense, you'll effectively only have -5 defense. However, there is one thing I would recommend if you're making an RPG. If you can, really consider just using small numbers and easy equations for your game. It just makes balancing everything like items and characters so much easier. Think like Mario RPG or even Darkest Dungeon. Damage values are low, predictable, and effective, and it doesn't take away from the core game. So those are the main systems that control battles in Project Bloom. The battle system is the core of what makes Project Bloom, and it's what I've spent the most time on. It's not the perfect system, and it has some janky flaws to it, but it at least lets me build the game that I want. Hopefully you were able to find value with this content. I stream the game's development on weekdays after 4 p.m. for a few hours over at twitch.tv/edamgames. If you'd like another technical deep dive, you can check out how I made the event management system for Project Bloom. Additionally, you can wishlist Project Bloom on Steam. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.